Hey, folks, let's talk about Captain America Civil War. This is definitely a movie that kind of sucks. And I know that we're way behind on doing this analysis, and I apologize for that. But, as time kind of slips by you like the ever flowing stream, it's difficult to catch all the things that you need to catch along the way. So I'm going to try to keep this analysis brief, and if it's not that brief, as usual, you know why. There might just be a lot to say. So is it going to be a good movie? I already said it kind of sucks. Well, whether or not you're going to like this movie depends a lot on what your expectations are and what you want it to deliver to you. If you want a very, very stimulating movie, if you want an experience that has a lot of stimulating visuals and has a lot of stuff going on that's exciting to watch, then it's probably going to satisfy you, right? In which case, you're probably not going to agree with me that the other things that I'm going to point out are of huge concern. However, if you want a movie that has an intricate and well-crafted plot, this movie's not going to deliver that to you. And if you actually wanted a Captain American movie, I don't think this movie is going to give you a Captain America movie either. And therein lies the first problem with Captain America Civil War, is that it is not a Captain America movie. This is you might be taking exception to this. This is a branding issue, but I think that affects audience expectations. The expectation with the Captain America movie is that you're going to really be focusing on Captain America, and it's going to be a movie about him. What this really is Avengers 3, although with a different set of circumstances that create the plot. It's really a direct sequel to Avengers 2 in almost every conceivable way that I can think of it. The reason that maybe they didn't brand it as Avengers 2 is that it's not about some epic fight to save humanity the way that those first two Avengers movies were, so maybe it didn't match what they perceived that brand to be, but it does not match the Captain America brand. Indeed, Captain America as a character gets much less screen time than what you would expect for a movie that's branded after him, and much less screen time than what he gets in the first two movies. There's virtually no development of his character, and there's virtually no development of any character, because what this movie is actually all about is showing you lots and lots of different characters. There are more Marvel movies, or more Marvel characters in this movie, I think, than in any other Marvel movie that's been made since Disney took over the franchise, and probably before. There's all the Avengers minus Thor, or maybe they didn't want to brand it as Avengers because they didn't put Thor in there. That's possible. But it's all of them minus Thor, including Hawkeye, who was supposed to be retired. He shows up at some point in the movie. It's got Bucky from Winter Soldier is in there. So it kind of just mixes everything together. It's got Iron Man, War Machine, got everything that you could possibly want in terms of characters, but that does not make, for me, a satisfying movie. What it instead makes is a schizophrenic movie that's full of references that are much more about the larger context of this Marvel Cinematic Universe than they are about the movie that you're watching. And if that's something that appeals to you, and I think it actually does appeal to a lot of fans, they like a lot of crossover kind of stuff. They like to kind of get the references, and they like to see things in sort of a more epic multi-movie sort of format. If that's your perspective, if that's something you really enjoy, then I think this movie will be satisfying. But that's not something that I really want from a single movie. It's fine to have those references, dabbled in here and there, but to have them take away screen time from the plot and the main characters, I think, is a mistake. And that's really what they do. There's even a point where Iron Man goes and recruits Spider-Man. Right, and we've now at this point, I guess there's going to be a Marvel, an MCU Spider-Man movie, and after we've had, we had the ones, we had that trilogy a while back, and then they rebooted that already, and now they're going to reboot it a third time. I'm a little tired of Spider-Man reboots. But I get why they're doing it. It's because they want to put it in their little ecosystem and not have to deal with the references that maybe Sony or whatever other company happened to make when they made Spider-Man movies. So there was a contractual thing, I think, where the rights expired and now Disney gets them. So there's a point where they're recruiting Spider-Man, Iron Man is recruiting Spider-Man. And the scene is completely pointless in the context of the plot. And Spider-Man's presence in the movie is completely moot. It doesn't matter, and I don't know why they did that. And they did it as fan service. And there's a danger when you do fan service, because if you're not a big fan, then you're just going to be hurting your overall product. And I think that's what happens. Now, you should know that I'm not anti superhero movies, nor am I particularly in love with them. They're just a style of movie that's become popular over the last 20 years, and I can enjoy them or I cannot enjoy them. I'm not stuffy, and I don't think superheroes are lame and dumb, but at the same time, I'm not all about them. I haven't read an Avengers comic since the early 1990s, to give you an idea of that. So, additionally, I don't know how this movie relates to, I guess there was a Civil War storyline in the comics. I have no idea how those two relate. I'm just judging this movie as its own thing. So there's the problem. There's the big problem is that it's not a Captain America movie, and they're throwing in so many characters and so many character references that nothing gets developed. No character progresses, and they even introduce Black Panthers. They introduce like several characters within the context of this movie to no real effect on the plot, in my opinion. Other than like Black Panther, he kind of has sort of a role at the end of the movie, so maybe he's acceptable. Then he's going to get his own movie, I think, and that's what it's about. Like, this movie is just like another piece to, like, get more interest in the overall universe and sell more tickets to other movies, because they've already established the Captain America franchise, and then they're using that establishment to introduce other characters to sell more tickets to later on movies. It's like this movie was developed entirely to market the entire MCU to people that have maybe only bought into one part of it. And that's kind of how I felt about it, and I think that that's a big drawback. Now, let's talk about, that's the setting, really. Let's talk about the characters. The characters, as I said, don't really develop much, and that's true. What we do have is sort of an artificial development of Iron Man from wisecracking superhero into emo kid. And that kind of started actually with Iron Man 3, where he started having panic attacks, which I actually thought was kind of okay, because I figured, hey, it would be actually pretty reasonable for people to be having panic attacks when they're like dealing with the insanity of what is happening to these superheroes on screen. But in this one, we have this artificial appeal to emotion that is really not believable, and this is really kind of what sets the whole plot in motion. There's a point where like this woman comes up to Tony Stark and hands him a picture of her son and tells him the story about how he was in like the Peace Corps or something. And basically he got a rock dropped on him at the end of the second Avengers movie, when like this entire city was being raised up in the air. And then Tony Stark has this emotional reaction and suddenly feels really bad about himself for this, which I don't really believe. I didn't really believe that from his character, and I wouldn't believe it from any reasonable person. That if someone came up and said like, my son died while you were saving the world, I would be like, I'm really sorry that happened, but it would have been way worse if we hadn't intervened, which is completely the like reasonable perspective. So they, rather than developing any kind of bad feelings that he has, they just kind of like throw that in there. And this is a follow-up to what starts the movie off, which is I think Red Witch like throws a bomb up in the air, and it blows up and like destroys half a building because they don't realize how big the bomb is, which is designed to make them like feel bad about what they've done. But the alternative would be for like them to die and for the people on the ground to have died. So I just didn't really believe. I understand the bad feelings, but I didn't really believe that they'd be like, oh, now we need. I'll talk about this in the plot. Now we need like the UN to look over us or something, which I don't really believe either. So there's not really any character development. Captain America doesn't really develop at all. He just basically starts with how he is, which is trying to save his friend Bucky, and it just continues with that to the end of the movie. So he doesn't really change his opinions that much. He doesn't. He ends up in a fight with Tony Stark over what I'll talk about in the plot, but it doesn't. When it almost resolves, then at the end it just doesn't resolve, and it ends up being just a little bit not good on the characters. And then there's so many other characters packed in. It wouldn't be possible really to have any real character development for any of the characters, because there's just not enough screen time. And this is a pretty long movie, if I remember right. And there's still not enough screen time for any of the characters to really grow and change. But I don't think that that's what the movie's about. I think the movie's about explosions and about referencing these other parts of the property to try to get people to buy tickets to them. It's a little bit little bit weird in that context, a little bit shady. The plot is the big problem with this, because even if there was no character development, but we had a really good story where those characters were acting out, through the story and really lining up the pins and knocking them down. The story revolves around a couple of things. The first big one is this idea that the Avengers need watching over by the United Nations or some other government body. And Tony Stark ends up being the one buying into this because of this artificial, like, feel bad that my son was killed while you saved the world kind of thing. And then a bunch of people agree with him. It's like, yeah, we really need government oversight. It's like, I don't know, that's completely unbelievable to me, because I don't know anyone that's in any agency in the government that wants more oversight of themselves. The idea is to have less and have more autonomy, because that's what helps you do what you perceive as your job as better. So even in the context of like this town getting blown up at the end of Avengers 2, I don't think any of them would realistically think that it would be good for them or good for the world to have more oversight, right? Because that's not the point of the Avengers. The point of the Avengers is that they're an extra government organization and that they are able to do things that the governments can't do, and that they're superhumans able to execute things that are impossible for regular government types to do. So the whole setup to me was just completely not believable at all, and I didn't believe any of the motivations of the characters involved in wanting to have oversight in the Avengers by the government, whatever government body, the UN or whatever else. The second part of the story is Captain America trying to save his friend Bucky, who's the Winter Soldier, from the other half of the Avengers, sort of, right? So you end up with this schism where there's the Avengers that are like, no, the whole point is for us to be extra governmental. And then you have the other half of the Avengers that are like, no, we need government oversight in some bizarre anti-psychological sense. So you end up with these two sides fighting each other, and the other side, Captain America is trying to save his friend Bucky, who's being hunted by the other half of the Avengers and by the different governments to basically get him in prison for this terror attack that they think he did. And it turns out that the entire thing was the result. Come here, dog. It turns out the entire thing was the result of basically a complicated frame-up, a complicated setup by this other character who was upset about his family being killed in Avengers 2. So that's why I think this is like a big sequel to Avengers 2. Now, the Captain America Bucky thing, that kind of works because we have a previously established relationship. It doesn't really develop, but that's okay. We don't really need it to. We just need it to be part of the plot that is executed. The third part is really the sort of overarching thing, and that's this like police officer, or I think he's a police officer, or former police officer, that is upset that his family got killed in this town getting destroyed at the end of Avengers 2, and so has this crazy plot to destroy the Avengers by turning them against one another. And although that motivation and that plot line seems somewhat convincing while you were watching the movie, sort of, you're always questioning it, and you're always like, well, I want to know more. By the time you get to the end and you get the final reveals and you go back and you look at all this stuff, you realize that guy could not have done all the things that he did without having some sort of omniscient knowledge. That he did a bunch of things that didn't make sense, and he wouldn't have done those things unless he had a large amount of pre-existing knowledge that we don't know how he gets or how he acquires it. So the whole plot at the end becomes just sort of falls apart and becomes really, really unsatisfying. So like there's a part where he tortures a Hydra agent, and the Hydra agent chooses to die rather than reveal some piece of information. They don't tell us what it is. He captures Bucky and like triggers like this psychological thing to find out about this mission that Bucky went on that he wouldn't have known about prior to torturing Bucky. He wouldn't have known about this particular mission that Bucky went on. That I don't want to reveal too many spoilers, but he wouldn't have known about this particular mission unless he knew about it before torturing Bucky, which would have made the not torturing Bucky, before triggering his little psychological programming from Hydra. He wouldn't have known about that. He would have had to have known about that prior to doing that in order to know about it from doing that. So that doesn't make any sense. And then that becomes the crux of creating the final conflict at the end of the movie between Captain America and Iron Man, which would have meant that he would have had to have complete knowledge of every single piece of what he did in the plot prior to him executing it. And a big part of him executing his little plot is to find out all the information necessary to destroy the Avengers. So it just doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense, really. And when you get to the end, it's very, very unsatisfying and also not really believable. In a sense, it feels really artificial, and that's the way that you end up coming away from this movie, is with kind of a deep unsatisfaction. And I watched this with my wife, and she's a bigger fan of these kinds of movies than I am, and she's also more forgiving than me, just so you know. And she was like, I think that was probably my least favorite one so far. And it's like, yeah, it definitely was my least favorite Marvel movie so far. So overall, I think it kind of sucks. There's going to be elements in any movie that are good and are probably would make the experience better or worse for you. Whether or not you want to watch it on video, if you can get it very, very cheaply, it might be worth a watch, especially if you're invested somehow in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But for people who don't really care, I think you'll probably agree with me that it's not such a good movie. It basically, I think it doesn't succeed in its aims, and it doesn't even really know what its aims are, other than to get people to go see more Marvel movies, and maybe in that case it will be functional. Likewise, I mean, last thing I'll say is it all comes down to your expectations. If your expectations are going to be really, really high, basically like Iron Man 1 or 2, or the Avengers movies, as far as what the total construction is going to be, then I think this is going to let you down. If you want a lot of exciting stuff with literally every character in the universe that I can think of besides Thor, there's even Ant-Man is in it at some point. So like, if you like all those references, this will probably satisfy you. It didn't satisfy me. Thank you for watching. You guys have a great day. I will see you, on the flip side. Feel free to check down below for my books and stuff. Muramasa Blood Drinker, which I have a copy of right here. Yes, very beautiful. Prophet of the God Seed. Garamesh, which is my little audiobook. You can actually listen to the audiobook for free here on YouTube. I have some new stuff coming out, hopefully soon, that I will get to update you all on. And I appreciate you joining me on the journey. Have a great, great day.